The conference room smelled like old coffee and desperation. Tuesday morning, 10:47 a.m., and my brother Marcus sat at the head of the table in First National Bank like he owned the place. 6 investors in expensive suits, a real estate attorney, and stacks of closing documents that would supposedly transfer ownership of what he'd been calling the family river house, for $750,000 cash. The river house brings $750,000 tomorrow, Marcus announced, spreading architectural photos across the table. Prime riverfront property. 12 acres. Private dock. Perfect location for the gentlemen's club we've been planning. My sister's never done anything with it, just sits empty while she wastes her time teaching. This sale funds our expansion into the metro corridor. I stood in the back corner, arms crossed, watching him pitch my property to investors who thought they were buying into an upscale entertainment venue. What Marcus called a gentleman's club was actually an illegal gambling operation that had moved locations 3 times in 2 years, always one step ahead of state gaming regulators. Behind the investors, I could see Mom examining floor plans. Dad was reviewing profit projections, planning their cuts of the sale proceeds that Marcus had promised them. My phone buzzed. County Assessor's office. Ms. Diana Reeves? This is Patricia Chin, County Assessor. We've received a title search request for the riverfront property at 1847 Willow Creek Road. Our records show restricted transfer status on that deed. Before we release any documentation, I need to verify your authorization for this sale. I smiled slightly, voice low. I haven't authorized any sale, Ms. Chin. That property has historical preservation restrictions and conservation easements. Transfer requires specific county approval and environmental review. Professional pause. The title search request came from Marcus Reeves claiming seller authority. Should I contact the district attorney regarding fraudulent property claims? Yes, please. And could you send confirmation of the deed restrictions to my attorney? I think we'll need documentation shortly. Forwarding now. Ms. Reeves, I should mention, whoever filed this title search represented the property as unrestricted residential real estate. That's material misrepresentation on legal documents. That's my brother for you. I hung up, checked my email. The assessor's confirmation loaded. Detailed restrictions on the 1847 property, including historical landmark status, wetland conservation easements, and specific transfer protocols requiring county board approval and 6-month environmental impact review. Restrictions Marcus had either ignored or never bothered to research. Time to end this fraudulent sale. I walked to the front of the conference room at 10:52 a.m. The investors noticed me first. A woman in jeans and a university sweatshirt wasn't their expected demographic for high-stakes real estate closings. Marcus's confident smile flickered. Diana. Didn't expect you here. I was just finalizing the details of selling my property without my knowledge or consent. I pulled out my tablet, showed the county assessor's documentation. 1847 Willow Creek Road. Deeded to Diana Reeves, sole ownership April 2019. Historical landmark registered August 2019. Conservation easements filed September 2019. Restricted transfer status requiring county approval and environmental review. None of which you mentioned to your investors. The room went silent. The real estate attorney, sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, was already reaching for her laptop. One of the investors, older man, expensive watch, clearly the money behind this operation, frowned. You said this was unrestricted residential property available for commercial conversion. My brother lied. I pulled up the historical landmark documentation. The river house was built in 1887. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. The property includes protected wetlands that provide critical habitat for 3 endangered species. Any transfer requires County Historical Preservation Board approval, environmental impact assessment, and public comment period. The process takes minimum 6 months and frequently results in denial for commercial development projects. The attorney was reading county records on her screen now. Her expression shifted from professional to alarmed. Mr. Reeves, these restrictions are public record. They appear on every title search. How did you represent this as available for immediate commercial sale? This is a family property, Marcus started, that I own. Sole ownership. My name on the deed. My tax payments. my insurance, my maintenance costs for 5 years. I showed them my property tax receipts, all paid current. Marcus has no ownership stake, no legal authority, no right to list, sell, or transfer this property. Another investor was pulling up county records on his phone. Holy shit. He's right. Historic landmark status. Conservation easements. Transfer restrictions. This property can't be used for commercial gambling operations even if the sale were legitimate. It's not gambling, it's a private club, Marcus tried. It's an illegal gambling ring that's been shut down twice in the past 18 months. I pulled up news articles. State Gaming Commission raids in March and September last year. Operating without proper licensing. Money laundering investigation. And now you're trying to fund your third location by selling my historically protected river house to investors who think they're buying developable commercial property. The attorney closed her laptop with deliberate care. Mr. Reeves, I need to consult with my clients. This sale cannot proceed. The title search reveals multiple undisclosed encumbrances that make the property unsuitable for the represented purpose. We can work around the restrictions. Marcus was sweating now. You can't work around federal endangered species protections and state historical landmark laws. I showed them the environmental survey I'd commissioned in 2020. The property provides breeding habitat for wood turtles and nesting sites for cerulean warblers. Both federally protected. Any construction or commercial development triggers Endangered Species Act review and likely prohibition. The county has denied 4 commercial development proposals on this property in the past 40 years. The investor with the expensive watch stood up. You knew about these restrictions when you proposed this location. I thought we could get variances, Marcus stammered. You told us this was cleared property ready for immediate development. We've invested $80,000 in architectural plans and feasibility studies based on your representations. The investor was already texting, presumably with his attorney. That's fraudulent inducement. Mom emerged from her corner, face arranged in practiced confusion. Diana, sweetheart, surely we can discuss this as a family. There's nothing to discuss. Marcus attempted to sell property he doesn't own, to investors he lied to for a business that's currently under investigation by state gaming regulators. I looked at her directly. And you've been helping him plan how to divide my money. I saw the spreadsheet on your tablet. Your share of the proceeds. She had the grace to look embarrassed for about 2 seconds before pivoting to justification. Well, you don't use the property. It just sits there empty. It sits there as protected conservation land that I actively manage. I conduct wildlife surveys quarterly. I maintain the wetland ecosystem. I coordinate with the County Historical Society on preservation efforts. I pulled up my project documentation. I've spent 5 years and $60,000 of my own money protecting that property as a historical and environmental resource. It's not sitting empty. It's serving its designated conservation purpose. Dad came forward, attempting his reasonable voice. Diana, be practical. Marcus needs capital for his business venture. You could sell the property, help your brother, and still have plenty of money. Marcus needs capital because his illegal gambling operation keeps getting shut down by law enforcement. I'm not funding criminal enterprise with my historically protected conservation property. I looked at the investors. Did he tell you about the federal money laundering investigation? The subpoenas? The fact that his last 2 clubs had their bank accounts frozen. The room emptied fast. Investors grabbing materials. The attorney already on her phone with what sounded like the State Bar Association. The money man making threats about fraud claims and legal action. Marcus slumped into his chair. You sabotaged this. You knew I needed this deal. I knew you'd been accessing my mail. Knew you'd found the property deed and somehow convinced yourself you could sell it. I'd been monitoring him for months, watching the scheme develop. I knew you'd probably try something desperate. Your gambling ring is $200,000 in debt and the investors are demanding results. So I waited. Let you plan your fraudulent sale. Let you commit fraud with enough documentation to guarantee prosecution. That's entrapment. That's consequence. I didn't force you to forge seller authorization on title search documents. I didn't force you to misrepresent property restrictions to investors. I just declined to stop you before you committed multiple felonies. I pulled up my security footage. Recorded conversations where Marcus discussed forging my signature on sale documents. I have evidence of everything. The forgery planning. The investor misrepresentations. The gambling operation details. The real estate attorney returned, 2 other lawyers with her now. Ms. Reeves, Diana Reeves, we represent the investor group. We need to understand the full scope of the misrepresentation. I showed them everything. The deed restrictions Marcus had hidden. The historical preservation requirements he'd ignored. The environmental protections he'd dismissed. The conservation easements that prohibited commercial development. The federal endangered species protections that made his gambling club legally impossible. One of the lawyers whistled low. This is systematic fraud. Securities fraud if he was promising investment returns. Real estate fraud for the property misrepresentation. Potentially federal charges if the gambling operation crosses state lines. It does. I pulled up Marcus's business records. He'd been sloppy with digital security. Online betting platform. Players in 6 states. Wire transfers through offshore accounts. The FBI's been investigating for 4 months. Marcus went very pale. You gave the FBI my records. I reported organized gambling operations and potential money laundering to appropriate federal authorities. Yes. That's what citizens do when they discover criminal activity. I looked at him directly. You thought I'd just let you sell my property to fund your illegal gambling ring? Thought family obligation meant enabling your criminal enterprise. Mom tried the guilt approach. He's your brother. After everything we've sacrificed. You sacrificed nothing. I paid my own way through college. Worked 2 jobs during graduate school. Bought the river house with my inheritance from Grandpa, who left it to me specifically, not to the family, because he knew exactly what Marcus would do with it. I pulled up Grandpa's will. He watched Marcus blow through $50,000 in inheritance money in 8 months on online poker. He wanted one property protected from that pattern. Dad tried reason. Diana, this is going to destroy your brother's life. Marcus is destroying his own life. I'm just declining to fund it with my conservation property. I looked at the lawyers. He forged seller authorization. Misrepresented property status to investors. Attempted to sell historically protected land without required approvals. How many charges is that? The lead attorney was making notes. Wire fraud for the interstate aspects. Real estate fraud for the misrepresentation. Forgery for the false documentation. Securities fraud if he promised investment returns. And whatever gambling charges the FBI brings. We're looking at potentially 20 years federal prison across multiple counts. Marcus dropped his head into his hands. My phone buzzed. Text from the county DA's office. Received referral from Assessor's office regarding fraudulent property transfer attempt. Need your statement. Can you come in this afternoon? I replied confirming 2 p.m. appointment, then looked at my family. I'm meeting with the DA at 2. I'll provide all documentation, recordings, and evidence of Marcus's fraudulent scheme. They'll determine charges. But yes, Marcus, this is going to have serious consequences. You'd send your own brother to prison. Mom started. I'd let my brother face consequences for attempting to sell my property to fund illegal gambling operations, yes. I felt surprisingly calm. 5 years of managing that conservation property, months of watching Marcus plan this fraud. It all led here. Family doesn't mean enabling criminal behavior. It doesn't mean sacrificing my protected historical property so he can open another illegal gambling club. 4 months later, the legal resolution was complete. Marcus pled guilty to wire fraud, real estate fraud, and operating illegal gambling operations. 32 months federal prison, $280,000 in restitution to defrauded investors, permanent prohibition from real estate transactions, and seizure of all gambling operation assets. Mom and Dad weren't criminally charged. They'd been participants but hadn't directly forged documents or collected investor money. However, 3 investors pursued civil claims for conspiracy to commit fraud. Those cases settled for amounts that required my parents to liquidate retirement accounts. The river house remained exactly what it had always been, protected historical property on conservation easement. I continued my quarterly wildlife surveys. Maintained the wetlands. Coordinated with county preservation boards. The property served its designated purpose. protecting endangered species habitat and preserving 1887 architectural heritage. I never responded to family contact attempts. Marcus sent letters from prison. Mom left voicemails. Dad tried showing up at my university office until campus security banned him. I blocked them all. Some relationships can't survive attempted property theft to fund criminal enterprise. A colleague asked me once if I felt guilty. Your brother's in prison partly because of evidence you provided. My brother's in prison because he attempted wire fraud and ran illegal gambling operations. I just documented his crimes instead of being complicit through silence. I looked at her directly. He tried to sell my historically protected conservation property. That's not family asking for help. That's a criminal targeting an asset. On quiet weekends now I visit the river house. Walk the 12 acres. Document the wood turtles nesting near the creek. Monitor the cerulean warbler populations. Maintain the 1887 structure that Grandpa protected and trusted me to preserve. The property Marcus tried to sell for $750,000 to fund gambling operations. The house that couldn't legally be sold without county approval anyway. The conservation land that serves purposes far more valuable than his criminal enterprise. The moving trucks never came. The bank closing never happened. The gambling ring never expanded. And the county assessor had my original deed, with every restriction, every easement, every protection that made Marcus's fraudulent sale legally impossible from the start. He'd listed my river house like it was his asset to liquidate. But the title search revealed the truth. Restricted transfer status, historical landmark protections, conservation easements, and federal endangered species safeguards. None of which mattered to Marcus until the county assessor called during his fraudulent closing meeting. Then everything mattered. The property is still mine. Still protected. Still serving its conservation purpose. And that's worth more than any gambling ring could ever justify destroying.